I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, we are talking to relationship expert Lee Wilson. He has been featured everywhere: Cosmopolitan Magazine, Bravo TV, New York Times, New York Post, The Today Show, you name it, he's been there. We are delighted to have him here on Spotlight today because he's talking about the essence of life, which are relationships. That's what it's all about. That's what it all boils down to. Lee Wilson, thank you so much for joining me here today on Spotlight Live.
Thank you, Logan. It's a pleasure.
My pleasure. Tell me a little bit about your connection with viewers. You've had over 50 million viewers on your YouTube channel. That's incredible. Is it the subject matter? Is it you? Is it your presentation? Is it the information? Is it a little bit all of that?
You know, I like to think that maybe it's a combination of all. One of the things that maybe separates me from some YouTubers is that I really try to focus on talking to just one person and don't see it as, you know, like an infomercial or like I'm speaking to a big crowd. And I also really try to speak to people who are looking for specific topics, or in this case, they're looking for information about a relationship that's in trouble. And so I really try to stay on topic. And, you know, I think that that's at least a decent reason, but the rest of it, to be honest with you, I'm not super sure. And that's one of the reasons I'm trying not to change anything, because I don't know exactly what it is, but I do appreciate it very much. And I'm really enjoying it.
Well, if it ain't broken, don't fix it. So that's always good advice, right? But relationships often are broken. I think these are tough times to maintain a relationship. There are a lot of distractions out there. People are glued to their phone. There are all types of enticements on that phone. What are some of the biggest problems you're hearing about when it comes to maintaining a relationship in 2022?
Wow. Well, you know, we have come out of an unprecedented time in our history and in most of our lives. And one of the things I hear a lot, as you've already mentioned, is this wonderful contraption that we hold in our hands so often, and we connect with the world through. And it's one of those things where it's not all bad. And so to present it that way would be wrong, but it's got some sharp edges sometimes, especially when it gets so much of our attention and the person that we love, who loves us, does not. And so that's one of the things I hear when people are just complaining is he's on his phone, she's on his phone a lot, and I feel neglected or that I'm not important. And, you know, another topic that's really interesting that started to come up is this idea of having almost separate lives in so many ways, because life, especially in the United States, used to be very centralized as far as around the home. And you had the traditional breadwinner would go out and work, he would come home, and the whole family was there. And nowadays, so many of us, mom, dad, kids, whoever's involved, are in so many different directions. And we are taught how important it is to just stay busy. It's seen as such a virtue to just not stop, to just be busy, busy, busy. We're going here, we're going there. The kids are on 6 different sports teams. And after work, we've got to break our necks to get them to practice on time. And we've got to go to the second job, you know, to pay for inflation. And we have to make sure that we're at the house because this person's going to be here to do this project for us at the house. And it just becomes a big bag of stress. And so when we do finally see each other, we are basically giving them our leftovers, and we're stressed out and we're not able to enjoy it. And so, you know, one of the things that we could really do to help ourselves is to do everything we can to simplify our lives. And if we go back into the history of our world and our country, when marriages survived longer, when the divorce rate was less, we had simpler lives. We weren't doing so many different things. Now, life may have been more difficult in some ways because survival, getting food, those kinds of things, especially when we were on farms. But one of the reasons that the marriages lasted longer is because people weren't so spread out and going in different directions and living different lives, and then giving each other the leftovers. There was a shared goal, and when work stopped, it stopped. And that's another thing that brings me back to the phones. So many people who I work with and who my coaches on my staff work with cannot stop. They're constantly working, and that's the excuse. It's like it's okay. I'm on my phone because I'm working, and so we further back away from our spouse, from our partner, because work is a virtue. And so we're in a bit of a mess with that, and it's a complicated situation. But those are a couple of things that I see, big picture wise, that are hurting us all.
And I guess it all comes down to communication, because if you're locked in here, you're not communicating with your significant other. And what is a relationship if not communication, right?
Right. And, communication is fundamental for intimacy. And if you say it slower, you can get the message. Into me, see. And so we're sharing these facts and these feelings of our lives, our day, our past, our plans for the future. And when we're staring at that little box, we're not. When we're working, we're not. And so, again, like you said, if it does come down to communication and sharing and interacting and just doing life together, these distractions have got to at least be modified and shrunk to a large degree. It's going to be helpful to a lot of people and a lot of relationships.
Now, a lot of people are drawn to your videos and to you because they need help. And what they need help with is often a broken heart. Tell me how you counsel a person who has lost a loved one to somebody else, to death, whatever it might be, but they're heartbroken.
So, in speaking of a breakup or a separation where a spouse has said, I want a divorce or I want to leave, or the person has said, we're not boyfriend and girlfriend anymore, we're breaking up, a lot of the times, the best thing I can do for them is to get them to at least slow or steady themselves from the panic, because the panic is what will make them usually do the exact wrong things, because it feels like this person is getting away, feels like there's an urgency to the situation. And so I've got to do something now. I've got to force the situation as though this person is hanging over a cliff and you've got to save them. And it's actually the exact opposite, because if you think about it, if they are saying, I'm not attracted to you like I was, which is actually what they are saying. Now, it's mostly emotional attraction, which is warmth and connection, but that's what they're saying. And so if you respond by giving them more of yourself, since it's something that at least at the moment they are not wanting and they're not attracted to, it becomes, for lack of a better term, repulsive. It's actually going to push them away. And so most people, when they get that news, when they have that conversation, their response is to panic and to try to force this reunion, to try to force this other person to get back together with them. And it's done out of love. It's done out of them wanting to be with this person and feeling like they have to fix it right now. But that approach, and like I said, it's done out of panic. That's the exact wrong thing to do. And so most of the time, I've got to get them to calm down and stop trying to do anything right now. The best course of action in that moment, to let the smoke clear a little bit, to back off, give this other person some breathing room, and show them, first of all, that you're strong enough to stay away, that you can stay away. You can give them this because you are basically being socially correct. You're being, so let's say it's socially healthy, because when another person says, I don't want to be around you right now, it's actually not a mature response to say, you don't get a say in this, you are going to be around me. And we don't realize it, because at the breakup, it doesn't feel that way. But that's actually what someone is saying when they go after this person and they say, we're going to talk, we're going to figure this out. Are you feeling any differently? And they just keep contacting them and pushing them. They're actually saying, I know you want this, but you're not going to get it. I'm going to make you do what I want you to do, which is not attractive. And so if I can help them understand a little bit of that, then they significantly increase their chances, and they at least don't hurt their chances, which they would be doing if they tried the other route.
Absolutely. I think that's a complete bullseye. There is nothing more unattractive to a person who is trying to slow down a relationship than the other person trying to accelerate it. But like, well, maybe we should have date night. Maybe we should meet and talk. Maybe we should go on a weekend together. All of that stuff would be fine if the relationship was healthy. But if the
Exactly.
relationship is falling apart, that's the last thing the person who's looking to distance himself wants to do. Tell me a little
Right.
bit about, go ahead.
Well, a lot of people will say, let's just talk this out like adults. They'll say that's what we should be doing, as though I'm suggesting that they play a game. But like you just said, if the relationship were intact, if it were intact and the other person was not wanting to leave, that would be exactly what you need to do. But since they actually don't want to be in the relationship, anything you're doing to try to make them sit back at the table, so to speak, of the relationship is only going to make them feel like they are being put in a cage. So you'll get nowhere. So that's exactly what you were saying, and I was echoing that.
Absolutely. I feel there, and I say it a lot to my sons and my daughter when I'm counseling them about their relationships, is that there's sort of a psychology of scarcity, that people really
Mm.
want what's scarce. If I set up a table with 100 sweaters on it, you walk by it. If I set up a table with 3 sweaters on it, they're going to look much more appealing. So sometimes quantity, availability, accessibility are important factors that we can control. We're not trying to manipulate, but we're also not trying to, as you said, kind of like repulse or push the other person away by being constantly there.
Right. And you're also preventing yourself from being taken for granted, because sometimes if like you said, if there's all these sweaters on the table for sale, it can make it look like this sweater where each is unique and it's going to look great on you, and you're probably not going to run into anybody else wearing the sweater. But when it's on the table and there's so many of them, its value looks less, like, oh, there's so many that it must not be that special. And you don't want to make yourself look that way. So to your point, I totally agree.
Absolutely. Tell me a little bit about your emergency breakup kit and your emergency marriage kit.
Well, as the title suggests, they are speaking to specific situations, but it's basically when you have gotten that message, or even if it's been a little while and what you're doing is not working, it's a guide to basically help you think through these things. And it's got some of the information you and I have already discussed on what your ex is going through, what they are expecting, and what you can do to give yourself the best chance to get back together with this person, to maybe invite them to the table where they actually want to work on this. And most people, as we've discussed a little bit, are inclined to do the exact wrong things. And so many times they get advice from a friend or a well-intentioned family member. And it's a lot of times the wrong thing to do. And simply because, just like with any other subject, if you want your haircut, you go to someone who knows what they're doing and who's done a lot of haircuts. If you are going to someone about your health, you would prefer they have a lot of experience. Your car, same thing. You don't just go to a friend and say, hey, I know you drive cars, would you fix mine? We want someone who works on cars and who's done it a lot. And so that's where the emergency breakup kit is the benefit of really 2 decades of me doing this. And so rather than having to reinvent the wheel or hurt your chances by trying things that don't work, can really give you a head start. And the same thing with the emergency marriage kit. There are quite a few different things when it involves marriage. And so I'm going to get into those and that. And there's a lot of documentation to help you when this other person maybe says, I might give you another chance, or let's try, which happens a lot with marriages just because there's so much that they could lose. You know, there's a lot more with marriage in terms of, a lot of times there's property, a lot of times there's children, even businesses, and just the social stigma of divorce. So people are sometimes more likely to give it a try and test you out, so to speak. And so I address that in the emergency marriage kit as well on my website, which is myexpatcoach.com.
myexpatcoach.com.
Yeah.
So they can get all of this.
myexpatcoach.com.
Yeah, and they can get all of this information, and they can access you as well. How can people get in contact with you? Do you do personal counseling? Do you do remotely? Tell me a little bit about your work.
Well, at the moment, I'm not doing coaching sessions. I have a staff of coaches who are terrific who do that. I'm mostly just doing YouTube videos and product development, but I am doing a live workshop, and we're probably going to do several of these. And the live workshop is actually starting this month. It's starting here in August, and it's called Relationship Reignite. And so for marriages, it would be Marriage Reignite. And it's a live workshop where I will be live, and there's questions and answers, and there will be some individual coaching in that. And it's basically where people who are wanting to save their relationship, even if they are alone, but oftentimes couples will say, this is not working, we've got to try to figure this out, and they'll come to something like that together. And we've done other programs like that, but this is the most complex, and this will be the best, and this will have myself and another one of my coaches, and will be accessible, and there'll be live Q&A. And that's available on my website as well, but that's called Relationship Reignite.
Wonderful, wonderful. Tell me a little bit about salvaging a relationship when there's another party involved. If, you know, the husband has a girlfriend or the wife has a boyfriend, or, you know, some variation on that. Is it possible to fix a relationship where the other person is already strayed?
It is, and I have seen it happen a lot. I'm not going to say it's not difficult, but relationships and falling in love is a process. And a lot of times Hollywood has made this into something that is just magical, and that it's just this mystical connection from the universe uniting you two, and that's what it is. When a lot of times it's based on dynamics between the two of you, and there's actually a process of where you're attracted to this person, and that starts physically, and then it becomes emotional attraction, and then it becomes acceptance, and then it becomes connection and intimacy. And that's a process that if followed, and again, it won't work with everyone, because not everyone is attracted to each other physically, not everyone is attracted to each other emotionally, and so it does take people out of the equation. And so that's where you do get that, I've never felt this way before, and this feels different, and that's because this person is a good match. But when people start to realize that they can fall back in love with their spouse or with this person that they were with, that's very helpful. And another thing is that there's a concept you've probably heard of, a phenomenon called limerence. And if people understand how that works, then they're probably going to be a little more cautious about leaving a marriage or a long-term relationship for something, a relationship that is now exciting them. And limerence is where chemicals in our brain, dopamine and serotonin being modified, it can go either way, but it will cause a similar effect where this person seems almost magical, where you feel this intense connection, and it feels like it's a house of cards, like you could lose it at any second. And that's one of the reasons that affairs are oftentimes so difficult to get out of and feel so intense, is because everything about them stirs limerence, that process in your mind and your body, because that fear of loss makes the relationship seem exceptionally valuable, that you could lose it, and it's so special to you. And we've even had people in MRI machines where we can see their brain function just seeing a picture of this person who they are in limerence with. And limerence is not a bad thing. Most of us, when we start a relationship with someone and we start to have that connection, we will have limerence to some degree. And so it's a great thing. That's those fireworks, the honeymoon stage, so to speak. But what happens is it will fade in time, and you will develop a different type of love, a more mature love, a companionate love that's not based on the sky high fireworks. But when you do feel some of that with someone else, that's where the relationship can be in danger, and you can be fooled into leaving what you have to go after that. So a lot of times, especially when a marriage relationship, for example, when someone says, I want to divorce this person and go be with this other person, if they can understand that it is most likely limerence, and in time, it too will change. The limerence part of it will fade. Then they start to see this from less of this magical, urgent moment that they have to capture, and to see it more as something that they were vulnerable to, and that they could actually fall back in love with their spouse. And that in that way, they can save this emotional investment. They can keep their family together. They can avoid this difficult, painful process of divorce, and they can at least give something that they have put so much into a chance. And just hearing that from someone who's in that situation, that might not be enough for them to say, oh, I want that. But if they can understand a lot of the information like that I provide and will provide in the workshop coming up that I mentioned, and I talk about in some of my videos and other people talk about, but if they can understand some of that, it can help get them to where they'll say, I can see where this could work. Assuming the other person is willing to change some things and improve and work on the relationship with me, I can at least see where this could work. And if you can just get them to where they're considering it that way, then you're way ahead and you can use that momentum. And a lot of times relationships can be saved even in those situations.
Absolutely. Do you think it's an important question to ask of each of the people being counseled? When was the last time you were happy with Mary or Joe or whatever it was, to try to travel back to that time when you two were excited, when she meant the world to you or he meant the world to you, or your heart was set aflutter when he walked in the room?
Right. It is very helpful for them to remember that and to realize that that was something they were capable of, especially when you're in a situation where they say, I just don't feel it anymore. Because that's a very common thing. Those feelings fade and they think that it's over, and they don't realize that they could come back, and that oftentimes they do. And so it is helpful to realize you have the capability. And now that this person, a lot of times, by the way, when someone is tempted and wanting to go off with another person or just wanting a divorce, the person who's wanting to save the marriage oftentimes learns an incredible lesson and is willing to make major changes. And the other person a lot of times will say, but I wish it didn't have to come to this. Why can't he just be who he needs to be without me having to threaten to divorce him? Which I understand that. But at the same time, I have seen such wonderful relationships develop from being in a situation where this other person thought they wanted out. And it's because the person who wants to save the relationship is actually in a position to really be impacted going forward, and to see the vulnerability of this, because we are all at risk of taking our relationships for granted. And I would say that everyone in earshot of my voice has taken a relationship that they had in their life for granted. And so if we just hold that against them and say, no, I'm going to divorce you or leave you because it took this for you to wake up, in many ways, you're hurting yourself, because you could be in a position where you could get everything that you wanted and hoped for in a marriage with this person who you were capable of loving deeply and wanting to be with at one point. You could get everything from staying with them because they have learned such a valuable and painful lesson. And that's something that I really hope people won't just dismiss, but will realize this could be terrific for them and for the other person. And that if they could learn to see this as a value, as something that really could be a positive that this person has learned. It's sort of like, I heard this from someone, and I don't know if it's a real situation, but it definitely speaks and teaches just from the story. It's a brief story, and it's where a man made a terrible decision and cost the company $30 million, and he was an employee. And one of the boss's friends said, well, when did you fire him? And the boss said, I didn't fire. And the guy said, why did you not fire him? And he said, it cost me $30 million to train him. He learned. And that's not a mistake he's going to make in the future. And he's going to be more cautious. He's going to be more aware, and is far less likely to do anything like that. And the same is true of a spouse who has had that wake-up call that the other person wants to leave. You are much less likely to experience at least to the same degree, the negatives that caused you to want to leave from this person who has now realized how important it is, or has had a wake-up call, or at least had to realize that what they were doing was not what was needed. And so they're actually willing to look at the changes that need to be made. You're much more likely to be happy with them and to not experience the negatives again than you are with a stranger or someone you've just met or someone you think you want to be with who hasn't had to learn that lesson.
Exactly.
It may not be as poetic or beautiful as the Hollywood narrative that we're used to and that we've grown up with, but that's actually real life.
Absolutely. People aren't disposable. Relationships shouldn't be disposable. You've invested time, you've invested energy, you've invested your mind, you've invested your heart. In many cases, that relationship is worth holding on to instead of the temporary distraction that is in your life right now. Lee Wilson, it is easy to see why you rack up the views on YouTube and other social media outlets as well. Folks at home, you can get in touch with Lee and his group by following the links below. His website is also on your screen right now. Lee Wilson, thank you so much for spending some time with us today on Spotlight and sharing all of your knowledge about this very, very important subject.
Thank you, Logan. It's been great to be here.
Great to have you. And I'm Logan Crawford, to the folks at home, thanking you for your time this time. Until next time on Spotlight.